welcome back to the Unfounded podcast. My name is Chris Turner. I am your host, and I am excited to be back on here, guys. It's been like 2 or 3 days since I've recorded anything. I've been getting over a sickness. I've been doing a lot of personal chores, things like that, man. Just getting cleaned up, making sure I'm good for the week, doing my meal prep, all that kind of stuff, man. But I'm good to go now, and I have nothing else to do besides sit here and talk with you guys. So lucky for you, right? But thank you, first of all, to all of you listeners out there that have listened to the first 2 episodes thus far. I'm shocked at how many people have already engaged with the podcast, and I'm very, very excited to see where it goes. I've been on Facebook kind of getting that rolled out. I've been getting some other pages like Twitter, YouTube rolled out so you can have different mediums to access or to at least communicate to me on. But that's kind of where I'm at right now. And so my next step is to try to figure out kind of what identity this podcast is going to have, right? You've kind of gotten a little idea of what I want to talk about in those first 2 episodes, but it's been very general and bouncing all over the place and things like that. And that's mainly because I have too many ideas to really organize right now. So what I want to do right off the bat with this podcast is kind of give you a little layout of what I'm trying to do here, so you maybe have a little better understanding of why, if you did think that the podcast was bouncing all over the place, why it was, right? And why I'm doing that. All right, so first off, obviously I want to talk about things like philosophy, spirituality, and science, right? I want to focus on these 3 main subject areas, for lack of a better term, because I think that they connect in some way, but I don't have the roadmap yet, right? In some ways, why these podcasts are going to be a little all over the place is because this is going to serve as my roadmap. I'm trying to talk through these ideas in real time with you guys and have engagement on that side as well, so I can maybe come up with a causal link between scientific thought, philosophical thought, and spiritual thought, even though those terms kind of they're kind of opposite spiritual thought. But anyway, that's kind of the main purpose, right? And it may sound a little non-concrete right now, but that's specifically why it is, because I believe that that's the way this process happens. That's the way you create something worth value, is you kind of have to have a little bit of faith, you know what I mean? And let it evolve, let it develop on its own, right? I don't know what this will become, but I can tell you what I hope it does become. And I think what I'm seeing for this podcast is, one, I want it to create a community, right? One of the lacking things I see out in the world is a lack of community, a lack of shared concern, a lack of shared goals, really. And one thing I want to do with this podcast is try to bring people together under the same understanding, right? And have like a shared goal, a shared vector that we can all try to push towards, right? And to make the world a better place, ideally. Correct? So that's kind of, in general, one of the ideas I'm trying to move forward with, is I want to create a community, right? How am I going to create a community? Well, through engaging with the ideas and the things that we consider founded, the things that we are comfortable with, the things that we consider law, right? I think that there's a lot of legitimacy in this world that is feigned, and I went into that a little bit in the first podcast, but the reason I say that is because, and without getting too deep into it, because I think this is a whole episode to itself, but I think that our focus on the expert as the source of all knowledge concerning one subject area or another has led us astray, in a sense. I don't think there are any actual experts in the way we think about them or conceptualize them. I don't even think the experts think of themselves. I'm referring to like experts in their field. If you were to say, like, I don't know, Neil deGrasse Tyson, for astrophysics or something like that, right? Like, these experts we consider like the end all be all on that subject because they have the most engagement with the subject area, but it doesn't necessarily mean they know everything, which is how we think about it, right? And that's part of what I'm trying to not only identify through this podcast, but prod. Because there's a lot of things we consider founded, we consider law, we consider, understood, even though we don't understand them. And I think that assumption is a fallacy. I have this weird feeling that a lot of the things that people have said or say is law is not. and that there's an area there that we can prod. And that through prodding that, we're going to make some kind of really valuable discovery that may actually help us move forward as a civilization. So that's why I'm identifying the founded principles as the things we need to go after, right? That's why I'm attacking the things that maybe that's why some of the subjects I'm going to bring up are going to be uncomfortable, right? And most of them will be, because I think you're not going to get any value if you're not pushing the limit, right? You're not going to glean any insight if you're not on the edge, constantly trying to make yourself uncomfortable and figure out where your gaps are and fill those in, right? And that's what this podcast is meant to do, okay? So even in the description here, I'm getting a little all over the place, right? You can tell why it's hard for me to say what it's going to be beforehand, but that's what people want, right? It's also kind of gets into a little bit of the creative process. I think this is a fallacy we tell ourselves. Most people tell themselves about how things are created. We like to think of it as if you go on, like I've said in one of the other podcasts as well, like if you go online and just download a schematic and then boom, you have the next great idea. It doesn't work that way. The way it works is you have some kernel piece or like image, slight, very, very low resolution image of what you want to do or what you need to do, and you have to figure out what it is as you go along, because you don't have that good of an image of it. You know what I mean? You have to take a piece and fill in the gap there, and then continue to work and let that lead you where it will, and then pick up that piece and fill in the gap there and continue on that road until you have a roadmap, you have a picture, you have a painting, you have a podcast, right? And then that's what I'm trying to do here. So without getting too much more into the details of why I'm doing this, that is kind of what this is going to be, if any of you were wondering, okay? It's going to be a place where you can come and expect to be put in an uncomfortable position. There's going to be uncomfortable questions asked, there's going to be uncomfortable subjects talked about, and I'm going to go ahead and ask all the things that I feel I need to until we get to some modicum of truth, of comfort. And so anyway, and on top of that, like I've said in the other podcast, I'm going to make this an unedited thing. And there's a very specific reason for that as well. I think I'm trying to in some ways demonstrate the creative process here and philosophical thought, what it looks like, right? I think there's two parts of that problem, right? We don't understand how the creative process works, and then we also don't understand what philosophical thought is. We don't understand that there's actual physical different physical is not the right word. There's actual different ways of thinking. One of those is the more analytical, I would say, call or name that the scientific way of thinking. It's this analyzing of the world. It's this very sensory dependent and immalleable way of viewing the world. Now, there's a lot of benefits to that way as well, because it's in some ways the most predictable way to view the world. But it's not the only way. What I'm trying to demonstrate here is philosophical thought, which is a way of taking problems and looking at them from different angles, right? Of kind of playing with the world. If I had to distill what philosophy is, it's a way of like taking the world and playing with it in your mind and seeing what you can fit and seeing what doesn't fit and pulling those things out and conceptualizing different ideas and like I said, playing with them. You know, like you don't like the form of government. Okay, think up a different one and then plug it in and see what happens in your mind. That's philosophical thought, right? That's what we are missing. Okay, and that's what I'm also trying to demonstrate in this podcast. Now, after saying all that, I want to make something very clear to all of you. I am not an expert in any of these fields. Okay, I have gone to college. I have a bachelor's degree in interdisciplinary studies, and those focuses were on political science and American history. So I am fairly knowledgeable in the political science realm and in the American history realm, right? And I do have a very good working knowledge of history, world history in general. But I am by no means an expert. I am by no means an expert in spirituality. I am by no means an expert in philosophy or philosophical thought. Okay, so I don't want you guys to come to me thinking that what you're going to get is this expert view, right? This view that you're going to go find in a book somewhere too and show somebody, be like, hey, he's right, you know? Like, that's not how this is going to work. This is like stuff I'm pulling out of my head, out of the ether, right? But I'm doing it because I think there's something valuable to it, and I'm trying to show that to other people so that maybe you do that too, and maybe we can start this conversation, this community, and generate some novel ideas and some novel ways out of the situations we are currently in. Does that make sense? I hope it does, because I haven't listened back to this yet. But from my vantage point, I feel like I've explained what I'm trying to do here pretty well. Okay? So, I know that's a little bit not very entertaining. That wasn't the point of it either, but I feel like it's something I needed to get out of the way, right? You guys need to understand what this is. I didn't really have a good enough conception of it the first 2 episodes to really tell you what it was, but I think I'm starting to crystallize something, and that's what I've got for you so far. So, what is it going to look like every week? Like, what am I going to do? Well, this is how my process looks. I wake up and I sit in front of the computer and I think for about 5, 10, 15 minutes, and then something pops in my head, and that's what I talk about. Okay? I'm not planning this in any way. I'm not sitting down and writing any of this stuff down. I'm not sitting here thinking about what I want the podcast, this episode, to end up talking about. None of that. I'm really trying to demonstrate how the creative process works here. And I think it's that you let yourself play. You know, you let yourself kind of go. You stop controlling things in a weird way. You watch what pops into your head and you start to play with those ideas. All right? I've done a couple other little mini episodes that I haven't released here yet because I wanted to talk about this first before I continued to go on any further. I wanted to go into what I'm doing here, what this podcast is going to actually be. And so before I kept on going, because if I just kept on like releasing random stuff, like different thoughts in my head every day, you guys are going to be like, what the hell is this guy doing? He's loony as Looney Tunes, you know what I mean? And like, I wanted to make sure you didn't run screaming about 3 episodes in. I don't think you are, but anyway. So we got it? Got that settled? Okay. Now that I got that out of the way, fun. What am I going to talk about today? That's a good question. I haven't really thought about it. See, this is what I'm talking about, though. We get uncomfortable when we don't know what to say in conversation, right? It's like, you see that all the time. I don't know if you've ever been out on a date or you ever been out with a group of friends or something, and there's this silence that hits you. And all you have to do is wait about 30 seconds. That's about it. And somebody in that group is going to say something. And it's not because they have actually anything to say. They're just going to break the silence. That's all they're going to do. And it's just because they're acting as a hero in some ways. They're trying to relieve the silence for everyone. You know what I mean? But there's an interesting question in that as well. And that is, why are we uncomfortable with silence when we're around people? Like, why? And I'm sure many of you have felt this as well, right? If you felt uncomfortable, it's almost like an anxiety that starts to build as soon as the silence starts. It's like, it's like a timer, like an automatic timer in your head. It's like 1, 2, 3. It's been too long. Too much silence. So I should say something. Hey guys, you know what I mean? And it just like pops out. Why do we do that? Isn't that funny? Like, because if you think about it, like, what's the point of saying something that has no value? Because that's what you do. To break the silence, you're just injecting sound. There's no information you're passing around. You know what I mean? Because every time you do it, you're talking about something bullshit. It's going to be like, what did you get to drink? Or, ooh, that looks good, right? Or, oh man, I haven't had a pizza in forever. Like, just random noise is what you're making. Like, no information. So why are you doing it? I don't know. Right? I didn't like sit down here and postulate this before. I'm trying to think it out as I sit here. And the only thing that's coming to me is we don't like sitting in silence because that's when our brains go crazy. And I think why it's more unbearable when you're around people is I think when you're silent and around people, you start to notice things you didn't notice before. What do I mean by that? Notice things? Like, what do I mean by notice things you didn't notice before? This is where I'll get a little bit spiritual. I think you start to pick up on the noise. It's like there's this. Best way I could describe it is it's like being tuned between a frequency, like tuned between a radio station. In the silence, when you're silent, you start to. It's almost like you start to pick up on this frequency, but this noise. Right? And it's the best way I could describe it is almost like a combination of everybody's thoughts going all at the same time. It's like you can feel people thinking, but they're not saying anything. And so it's like this, you get this anxiety that starts to build. You know what I mean? And it's like, why? What are people thinking? What are they saying? What are they thinking? What are they saying? I need to break the silence. Boom! And you break it, right? Because you need to get out of there. You don't want to feel that anxiety. But why are we anxious? Like, why is the feeling that you get when you're in a situation like that where nobody's talking anxiety? I mean, I'm honestly, this is a tough one. I don't know. Well, in what other situations do we get anxious? That's a good way to continue. Because I mean, try to define what anxiety is. Well, you get anxious when you're not doing something, right? Like you get anxious when you know you should do something, but you're not. Or when you perceive a threat, but it's not here, right? Anxiety is almost like the lack of action. You know, it's like it is the thing that comes inside of you when you feel like you need to do something, but you aren't. You know? And so in the context I'm talking about, anxiety being inspired inside of you when there's a silence, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is whether like our response to that is right or not, proper or not. Like, is the proper response to actually inject something without value, just noise, or is the proper response to like sit in that anxiety? Is to like sit in that silence until something worth value comes up. Like something pops into your head that has actual value to the conversation, you know? Because in some ways I think that being comfortable with that silence is what will produce the best version of thought out of your head, right? If you think about it, like you have to wait for things. You have to vet your ideas. You have to watch them come and go, right? And if you are focusing on the feeling of anxiety, and this like kind of applies to anxiety in general. This is, again, I didn't know I was going to talk about this, but anxiety, because I have general anxiety disorder. It's kind of a little tidbit about me, right? I've dealt with it for most of my life. And we can also get into what I think about mental disorders in a later episode. That's going to be a whole like 5-series episode. But anyway, anxiety is that thing that that makes you feel like you're always not doing something. Like there's always something you could be doing more. And when you focus on the feeling of anxiety, you start to realize that acting on the impulses anxiety brings up doesn't fix it. It doesn't make it better in a weird way, which is why I'm analyzing this very, very specific situation at depth. Is like, why do people break the silence? Because when you act on that anxiety, it doesn't get better, and I know that from personal experience, right? Like it's similar to like OCD in some way. Like you can go and do the ticks, like you can go and check the doorknob 5 times, but it doesn't make your anxiety go away. It almost in some ways makes you feel more crazy or more insane. You know what I mean? So it actually builds. It makes you a little bit more unstable. So it's like it's the thing that is hurting you that you keep going towards, you know? You might be able to hear my dog snoring in the background. She's so damn cute. Sorry, a little side bit there. Anxiety is very linked to fear. It's very similar. Like anxiety and fear are very similar emotions. It's almost like anxiety is the short-term impulse of fear. You know, it's the thing that gets you to move. It's like you can be fear is like the general like identification of something dangerous, right? So it's like you fear things that you know are unknown or dangerous, one of the two. But the anxiety is like the active part of that fear. It's like the thing that gets you to move about it. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, you know you're afraid of snakes, but you're not gonna avoid them or make moves away from them or kind of look for them unless you have that anxious feeling about them constantly, right? And so fear is like anxiety is like the mover of fear. And I think part of the reason why this is interesting. This is just an interesting little side street I'm going down. Anxiety. Anyway, yeah, this link between fear and anxiety. Anxiety is like the active part of fear. It's the thing that inspires you to move. But if you respond to it only, if you only focus on the anxiety part and don't link it deeper to what you're afraid of, you end up just going in this cycle where you, sure, like by acting on the anxiety, it does kind of, in the short term, reduce it. For instance, in the example we were talking about, if we were sitting there at a table with a group of friends and there was nothing to say and we were sitting there for 5 minutes, then somebody breaks that silence, acts on the anxiety. Sure, it quells the anxiety for a little bit, but the next time that happens, anxiety's right back. So it doesn't actually solve that anxiety problem. It just postpones it. It creates a cycle out of it. And so, how do you break out of that cycle? How do you get the anxiety to go away? Forever, right? That's what everybody wants. Anxiety forever, go away. Well, I think there's a little bit of a tough truth with that. The secret is anxiety doesn't go away. It's there for a reason. Anxiety is a tool. Just like, fear. Just like we talked about in another episode, like fear. Fear is a tool just like anxiety. But fear is like I'm mixing up my terms here. Anxiety is the more active form of fear. It's like the verb of fear. Right? That's the way I would describe it. And if you recognize that, in order to eliminate the anxiety response, the action of that fear, you have to eliminate the fear itself. You have to figure out what you're afraid of. And that's actually a really good way to start down this path of figuring out what you're afraid of, is watch your anxiety. Throughout the day, watch what you get anxious about. If you're driving through town and you get that sick stomach feeling, everybody knows that feeling. You know what everybody knows what it feels like, anxiety, right? So when you feel that feeling, all I'm going to say, I'm just going to suggest you do one thing. When you feel that feeling, hopefully it triggers this conversation in your head. And you think, instead of just acting right away, you take like a second or two and you think about that feeling. Look at it, watch it, see what it's doing. See how it's actually making you feel, making you feel, giddy and energetic, but also fearful. How it's actually physically affecting you. And then try to figure out, if you're ready, if you're not, if you're brave enough, like try to figure out why you are actually feeling that way. Because you can figure it out. You know why, but you're just not looking at it. You're only looking at the anxiety response, not the fear base. So when you feel that feeling, try to figure that out. It could be anything. You could have had some small, like for instance, you could have gotten in a car accident when you were 5 years old. You know what I mean? And you were in the left-hand turn lane when that happened. And so every time now when you get in the left-hand turn lane, you may have forgotten that experience, but every time you get in the left-hand turn lane, you get an anxiety fear response. You start to feel anxious and you don't know why. And so maybe you avoid the left-hand turn lane. Or maybe you forget to turn your blinker on or something, but you do some weird tick every time you get there because anxiety, boom, well, it's there, I got to respond, kind of a thing, right? No. Because if you sit there and think, why am I doing this? Why am I avoiding the left lane? Why don't I ever use the left lane? Because it may have been, if you're 5 years old, you probably don't even know why. You probably don't even know why you're doing that. But if you sit there and watch it, you'll realize really quick why you're doing that. It's like something turns on that connection again, and you're like, oh yeah, when I was a kid, we had that car accident. And then once you connect that dot, don't you see how ridiculous the response looks afterwards? You know what I mean? Then you're like, oh my God. Wait. So like the anxiety response isn't like something it's not just like my body's default telling me you have to do this. No. It's actually like a cycle I've created. And I'm self-perpetuating it. And it's completely on me and my responsibility to fix that. And the only way I do that is by figuring out what is driving that anxiety. What fear is the base of that anxiety? And once you see that fear, anxiety starts to go away, like almost instantly. It's kind of freaky, So anyway, let's bring it back to the conversation part. You know what I mean? Let's bring it back to, we're all sitting in this restaurant, we're having a good time, we're ordering food and stuff like that, and we get hit with the silence. Oh shit, nobody's saying anything. Isn't that what goes on in your head? That's what goes on in my head. Ah, shit. Why is nobody talking? Oh, crap. Hopefully this doesn't take too long. Where's the waiter at? Is the waiter going to come by? They haven't even taken our drink order yet. Hopefully somebody breaks this out. You get it. And you go and you go and you go and you go. For me, why do I feel like that? I'll tell you why I feel like that. If I can figure it out. Let me give me a minute. Why do I do that? I don't know. I gotta think about it. Let's see. Why is that my response? Like, why do I? Yeah. Why when I am, and maybe this is just something with me. This might be a little weird. Most of you might be sitting there like, this guy's freaking loony. Like, I never feel that way when there's silence. So be it. You know what I mean? If that's how you feel, no big deal. But this is me, man, and I'm gonna try to figure out where the hell this anxiety comes from. So, I think it comes from a place of, for me, I kind of already described it actually. When there's silence, I feel like I can feel everybody thinking, and it starts to like bombard my head. You know what I mean? It's like silence. I've always had a discomfort with silence ever since when I was a kid, because I feel like when there's silence, it's when everything's the noisiest. If anybody out there understands what I mean. And this, I'm also getting a little spiritual right now as well. But for me, I think the reason I feel anxious when everything's quiet is because I feel like I'm picking up on everybody's thoughts, and it's like, shut up, talk, say it. You know what I mean? It's like, stop thinking all this stuff. You're thinking just like I am. It's like, it's the weirdest thing. And that's why I get afraid of it. That's why I get anxious. I'm like, let's stop this. Let's interject. The interesting thing is that when I've tested that with myself, though, when I've actually just like let myself sit in that anxiety for a while, what I always find happens is somebody else just is the one that breaks the silence, just like I would anyway. That's how I know other people feel this way. You know what I mean? It's because like if I'm brave enough ever to not like be the one that interjects and breaks the silence, then somebody else does it anyway. So I'm like, okay, word up, you feel me too. You know what I mean? Anyway, I mean, this one might not even be, it's not like, how important is that? You know, not talking the first 5 minutes you sit down at a table, it's not that important. But you do see kind of what I'm talking about at the beginning of this podcast with what I'm trying to do here is like, hey, sit down and take an idea and let's see where that freaking sucker leads, man. Maybe there's some value in it. And even if there isn't, I'm going to send it to you. You know what I mean? Like, because it's not about like being right. It's not about like knowing all of the facts in the book. You know what I mean? It's about human experience, man. It's about shared experience. It's about having an open mind. It's about vetting yourself. It's about figuring out who you really are and what you really are. And I hope that through this podcast, I'm able to kind of guide some of you along the path that I've been going on. You know what I mean? Not saying it's correct or not, but just demonstrating the way I view the world. And I think there's value in that. And I hope that that can inspire some of you guys out there to figure out whatever your vision of the world is and make it, man. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying in like a go change the world sense. I'm saying like, figure out what you are. Figure out what your calling is, you know? Like, figure out what would, if you could have the perfect life, what that would be, and then try to make it, man. Like, I guess I'm trying to, in some ways, I'm experimenting with what I think the method of success is in the world. I'm trying to see if it works as I do it. You know what I mean? And we'll see what happens. But I hope that you guys try to do the same thing. Like, as I talk through these situations, I talk through these emotions and strategies to deal with them and stuff, I hope you apply it too and let me know whether it works or not. You know what I mean? Because if I can get that kind of feedback, then maybe I can put together a roadmap here. You know what I mean? Like, we can check off, hey, that idea worked and that one didn't. Then and get like a crowdfunded idea generator here, man. Like, can't you see how valuable that would be? And that's what I want this to be. So in order to help that along, I'm going to get on here every day and I'm going to talk about something completely off the cuff. And you know what? It may sound stupid. I may make some mistakes in the middle of it. I may say something completely and utterly wrong. If I do, so be it. Because there's no other way that you make something valuable. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to trip up. You're going to fall. You're going to look stupid. You know what I mean? Like, that's all part of it. You don't get the finish line without the build up, without the work, without the sacrifice. And so I guess what I'm trying to do with this podcast is show you that. And I don't know if it works because I'm still sitting here just like you. It's not like I'm sitting here in some mansion, already successful, all that kind of stuff. No, I'm just taking the things that I've heard successful people say and actually testing them and trying to do it in a public way so you guys can see what happens. And I hope you test them out too. I think maybe I did a good job of explaining what I'm trying to do here. I hope you guys understand what I'm trying to do here, and I hope you enjoyed the little tidbit in the middle about anxiety and fear. I definitely have a lot more to say about that. The situation was very specific I was using, but I think it was a kind of an interesting talk anyway. If you have any comments, concerns, ideas, anything like that for me, and you wanna let me know, I am out on Facebook now. You can drop me a comment on there. I do have a Twitter page, it's the Unfounded podcast, and then I'm going to be doing more work on the actual Podbean website. If any of you have been on there, try to make it a little more interactive for you guys as well. Okay. But if you have any questions, comments, concerns, Facebook's probably the best bet for now. All right. And please do like, share, subscribe. If you have any friends out there that you think might like the podcast, please share it with them. Right. I want to grow this community and I want to see what happens with it. All right. So I think that's all I got for you guys today. All right. I know it's a little bit different, and I promise you it's going to be more topic focused in future episodes. But I did feel I felt a responsibility to try to describe what I'm doing before I go any further in this podcast. All right. And I hope you understand that. Okay. So with that, that's all I got, guys. I hope you have a good start to your week tomorrow on Monday, and hopefully I'll have another one out for you tomorrow. All right. Thank you. Have a good one.